You think you can walk away. Mira, after everything, I paid for you. Your body, your time, everything. You belong to me.
I don't belong to you. I sold one night. Damien, not my soul.
You sold more than just one night. You sold your freedom, your dignity. You knew the price.
And I regret it. I regret all of it. I lost myself, my happiness, for what? Some money that feels like poison in my hands.
But you still need it. You still need me.
Let me go, Damien. I hate you. Mira Johnson sat on a worn-out wooden stool in her mother's dimly lit one-room apartment, staring at the flickering bulb overhead. The air smelled of damp clothes and kerosene, a reminder of the struggles she had endured her entire life. Outside, the sound of street hawkers calling out their goods filled the evening air, mixing with the faint laughter of children playing in the dusty streets of Ajagun, Lagos. Mira was tired of poverty, tired of suffering, tired of watching her mother struggle to provide, and tired of dreaming without seeing results. At 24, she had expected to be living a better life, not still stuck in the same cycle of lack that had plagued her family for generations. Her mother, Mama Johnson, lay weakly on a thin mattress, coughing into a faded wrapper. The illness had started a few months ago, and despite several visits to the local pharmacy, there was no improvement. The doctor had recommended further tests at a private hospital, but Mira knew they couldn't afford it. Her younger brother, Emeka, had also dropped out of school because they couldn't pay his fees. He was now spending his days playing football with the neighborhood boys, his once bright future slowly slipping away. Mira had tried everything, working double shifts at the high-end Emerald View Hotel, where she was a waitress, taking up extra cleaning jobs, and even skipping meals to save money. But no matter how hard she worked, the money was never enough. She hated her job at the hotel. The wealthy customers treated her like she was invisible, or worse, like a beggar. She had lost count of the number of times she had been insulted, groped, or dismissed with a wave of the hand. Just last week, a rich woman had accused her of stealing a napkin, humiliating her in front of everyone. But she endured it all because she had no choice. Her best friend, Tasha or Konkwo, was living a different life. Tasha was the same age as her, but while Mira struggled to buy a decent meal, Tasha flaunted designer handbags, wore the latest clothes, and drove around in expensive cars. Mira had often wondered how she afforded such a luxurious lifestyle, given that she had no stable job. One evening, as they sat at a roadside suya stand, Tasha finally revealed her secret. "Mira, you're too beautiful to be suffering like this," she said, biting into a piece of spicy meat. "Look at me. Do you think I break my back working for peanuts? No, my dear. I use what I have to get what I want." Mira frowned. "Tasha, what are you saying?" Tasha leaned in, lowering her voice. "There are rich men out there willing to spend money on a beautiful girl like you. All you have to do is give them what they want." Mira's stomach twisted. She had heard stories about young women who went down that path. Some made money, others disappeared. But when Tasha mentioned Damien Carter, a billionaire willing to pay $50,000 for just one night, Mira felt her resolve begin to shake. Mira couldn't sleep that night. The words Tasha had said kept replaying in her mind. There are rich men out there willing to spend money on a beautiful girl like you. All you have to do is give them what they want. And then came the part that shook her. $50,000 for one night. $50,000. That was over 40 million naira. With that money, she could pay for her mother's treatment, enroll Emeka back in school, rent a better apartment, and even start a business. Just one night. One night and all her problems would be solved. But at what cost? Mira had never been that kind of girl. She had always believed in hard work, in dignity. She had spent years struggling, refusing to take shortcuts even when life pushed her to the edge. But right now, dignity wasn't paying the hospital bills. Pride wasn't keeping her brother in school. She picked up her phone and typed a message to Tasha. "Mira, who is this Damien Carter?" Within seconds, Tasha responded. "Tasha, a billionaire. Very private. Very powerful. You don't find him, he finds you. And he wants you, Mira." Mira's hands trembled. "He wants me." She felt something cold run down her spine. She had heard of men like this, rich, untouchable, with secrets buried deeper than the ocean. What kind of man was willing to throw away $50,000 for one night? Mira, how do you know he wants me? Tasha, I showed him your picture. He liked what he saw. Mira's heart pounded. She hadn't even agreed, yet a man she had never met had already decided she was his for the night. Mira, I don't know, Tasha. I need time to think. Tasha, time won't pay your mother's medical bills, babe. He's in Lagos for a few days. He wants to meet you tomorrow night. Private club. No pressure, but if you don't take this, someone else will. Mira dropped her phone and buried her face in her hands. She wanted to scream, to cry, to curse life for putting her in this position. But instead, she sat there in silence, staring at the ceiling, lost in thought. The next evening, after hours of hesitation, Mira found herself in front of the Monarch Club, one of the most exclusive clubs in Lagos. She had borrowed a fitted red dress from Tasha, paired with black heels that were slightly too high for her comfort. The bouncer at the entrance barely glanced at her before stepping aside. "Mr. Carter is expecting you," he said in a low voice. Mira swallowed hard and stepped inside. The club was dimly lit, filled with the scent of expensive cologne, cigars, and power. Rich men in tailored suits sat at private booths, sipping drinks with women draped over them like accessories. She spotted Tasha sitting at the bar, waving at her. Mira made her way over, her heartbeat echoing in her ears. "Relax," Tasha whispered, squeezing her hand. "He's in the VIP section. Go in, be confident, and let him see why you're worth it." Mira took a deep breath and walked towards the guarded section. The door opened, revealing a luxurious private lounge. And there he was, Damien Carter. He sat on a black leather couch, dressed in a tailored charcoal suit. His complexion was light, his features sharp, his presence overwhelming. He exuded the kind of confidence that came from knowing he owned the world. His piercing eyes locked onto Mira, scanning her from head to toe. "You're even more beautiful in person," he said, his voice deep and smooth. "Sit." Mira hesitated before lowering herself onto the couch opposite him. Damien leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "Tasha tells me you need money." Mira's mouth felt dry. I do." He smirked, as if he had already won. "Good. I don't like wasting time. I'll be direct. I want one night with you. No strings. No complications." Mira felt her stomach tighten. "And the money?" Damien pulled out a small envelope and placed it on the table. $50,000. Half now, half after. Mira's eyes flickered to the envelope. That money could change her life. But why did this feel like signing a deal with the devil? I need to think about it," she whispered. Damien's smirk widened. "Take your time. But not too much. Offers like this don't come twice." As she walked out of the club, her hands trembling, one thought haunted her. Was this a blessing, or a curse? Mira stood in front of the towering penthouse building, staring at the massive glass doors that reflected her trembling figure. The cold evening breeze brushed against her exposed skin, but it wasn't the Lagos night air that made her shiver. It was fear, uncertainty, and a deep sense of self-betrayal. She could still hear Tasha's voice in her head. "Just close your eyes and think of the money. One night, Mira. Just one night." She wanted to turn around and run. But the envelope in her purse, the first half of the money, felt like an anchor pulling her forward. She had already spent part of it on her mother's medication. There was no backing out now. With a deep breath, she stepped inside. The elevator ride to the top floor felt like an eternity. When the doors opened, Damien Carter was already waiting for her, dressed in a silk robe, a glass of dark red wine in his hand. He didn't smile, didn't offer any warm greetings. He simply extended his free hand toward her. "Follow me," he said, leading her inside. His penthouse was nothing like she had imagined. It wasn't just luxurious, it was cold, impersonal, like a place designed for transactions rather than comfort. Dark furniture, dim lighting, expensive paintings that lacked warmth. "Drink?" he asked, holding up the glass. Mira shook her head. "I'm fine." Damien's eyes lingered on her. "You're nervous." She forced a smile. "I've never done this before." His expression didn't change. "That's good." Myra's heart pounded. Something about his response sent a chill down her spine. But before she could process it, he stepped closer, his fingers brushing against her arm. "This isn't about feelings, Myra," he murmured. "You're here because you want something, and I'm here because I do too." She swallowed hard. She had expected this to feel transactional, but hearing it out loud made it worse. The next moments were a blur. The bedroom was dark, the air thick with the scent of expensive cologne. Every part of her wanted to scream, to push him away, to leave. But then she thought about her mother, her brother, and the life she could build with the money. So she silenced the voice in her head, closed her eyes, and let herself become what he wanted. The morning after, Myra woke up to silence. For a moment, she didn't know where she was. The sheets were smooth and cold, the air-conditioned room too sterile. Then she remembered. Damien was gone. She sat up, pulling the covers around her, her body aching, her mind spinning. On the bedside table was another envelope. The rest of the money. No note. No message. Nothing. She stared at it for a long time, feeling sick. She had gotten what she came for. But at what cost? Myra sat on the edge of her bed, staring at the bundle of cash in front of her. It was supposed to feel like a victory, the reward for her sacrifice, but instead, it felt like a curse. The room was silent except for the sound of her own breathing. The night with Damien had ended, but something inside her had changed. She had expected to feel relieved, maybe even a little proud that she had done what needed to be done. But all she felt was emptiness, a hollow ache in the pit of her stomach. She ran a hand over her skin, as if trying to wipe away the memory of his touch, but no matter how much she scrubbed, the feeling remained. Myra had imagined this moment differently. She thought she would wake up feeling powerful, in control. Instead, she felt used. Forgotten. That morning, she took a long shower, hoping to wash away the guilt, the regret, the lingering scent of Damien's cologne. But the water did nothing. By the time she stepped out, her phone was ringing. It was Tasha. "Babe, how was it?" Tasha's voice was filled with excitement. "Tell me everything." Myra closed her eyes. "It's done." "And? How do you feel?" Myra hesitated before answering. "I don't know." Tasha chuckled. "You're overthinking. It's just money, babe. Now, what are you going to do with it?" Myra sighed, looking at the cash again. She knew exactly what she would do. The first thing she did was pay off her mother's medical bills. She handed the money to the doctor, feeling a strange mix of relief and sadness. "Your mother will get the treatment she needs now," Dr. Funmi said with a warm smile. "You did the right thing." Myra forced a nod. "Did I?" She also cleared Emeka's school fees, ensuring he wouldn't have to miss another term. When he hugged her tightly, thanking her, she felt tears prick her eyes. This was why she had done it. This was what mattered. But why did it still feel so wrong? Days passed, but Myra couldn't shake the feeling of unease. She avoided Tasha, ignored Damien's number in her phone, and threw herself into work. But nothing felt the same. She couldn't sleep. When she closed her eyes, she saw Damien's cold stare. She couldn't eat. Everything tasted bland, lifeless. She started having nightmares, dark, suffocating dreams where she was drowning in a sea of money. But no matter how much she grabbed, it slipped through her fingers. Her body felt different too. She was always exhausted, weak. The smallest things irritated her, and sometimes, she felt like she was being watched. One evening, as she walked home from work, she caught sight of a black car parked near her street. The same black car Damien had arrived in that night. Her blood ran cold. Something wasn't right. And deep down, she knew this was far from over. Myra's heart pounded as she quickened her steps, her eyes darting toward the sleek black car parked across the street. The tinted windows revealed nothing, but she felt the weight of an unseen gaze pressing against her back. Was it Damien? Or someone else? For days, she had felt like something was off. The money was supposed to bring her peace, yet all it had done was invite paranoia into her life. She dismissed it at first. Maybe she was just overthinking. But the nightmares, the strange phone calls with no one speaking on the other end, The same car appearing near her workplace, she couldn't ignore it anymore. By the time she reached her doorstep, her hands were trembling. As she fumbled with her keys, her phone vibrated in her pocket. She hesitated before pulling it out. Unknown number calling. She let it ring. Then came the message. Meet me at the Monarch Club. We need to talk. DC. Myra's breath caught in her throat. Damien. She hadn't spoken to him since that night. He had never contacted her. Why now? And why did she feel like this was more than just a casual check-in? Her first instinct was to ignore him. She had gotten her money. Their business was done. But something about the message unsettled her. Against her better judgment, she found herself heading toward the Monarch Club, her stomach twisted in knots. The club was quieter than usual when she arrived. A waiter led her to the VIP section, where Damien sat in his usual spot, a glass of whiskey in hand. He looked up as she approached, his expression unreadable. You came, he said smoothly. I almost didn't, Myra replied, crossing her arms. What do you want? Damien exhaled, swirling the amber liquid in his glass before setting it down. I need to tell you something. It's important. Myra didn't sit. She just stared at him, waiting. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. That night, I should have told you the truth before we did anything. A chill crept down Myra's spine. What truth? Damien hesitated. For the first time, she saw something in his eyes, something that looked almost like guilt. You were a bet, Myra. The words hung in the air, suffocating. A bet, she echoed, her voice barely above a whisper. Damien nodded. Chief Degun and we were talking about how women are willing to do anything for money. He bet me $50,000 that I couldn't find an ordinary girl, someone innocent, and convince her to spend the night with me. Myra felt like the ground had been ripped from beneath her. Her stomach twisted violently, nausea creeping up her throat. So you played me, she choked. Damien's face remained unreadable. I didn't expect to feel guilty, but I do. Myra could barely hear him. The blood was rushing in her ears. She had sold herself for money, and worse, she had been nothing more than a game. Tears stung her eyes, but she refused to cry in front of him. She grabbed her purse and turned on her heel. Damien called after her, but she didn't stop. She had paid for her decision, and the price was far more than she could bear. Myra stormed out of the Monarch Club, her heart pounding so hard it felt like it would burst out of her chest. The city lights blurred as her eyes filled with unshed tears. She wanted to scream, to curse, to turn back and slap Damien across the face. But most of all, she wanted to erase that night. She had given herself away, not for love, not even for desperation, but for a bet. A bet. Her legs felt weak, but before she could reach the exit, a strong grip caught her wrist. Myra, wait. Damien's deep voice pleaded behind her. She yanked her arm away and spun around, fire burning in her eyes. Don't touch me, she spat. How dare you? Damien sighed, raking a hand through his hair. Just listen to me. Listen to what? Myra's voice trembled with rage. Listen to how you humiliated me. How you turned me into a joke for your sick games. His jaw tightened, but there was something in his expression, something that almost looked like regret. Almost. It wasn't supposed to happen like this, he muttered. Myra let out a bitter laugh. Oh, how was it supposed to happen, Damien? Were you supposed to sit back and laugh with your rich friends after you used me? No, his voice was firm, but low. I never planned to tell you. I thought you'd take the money, move on, and never look back. But he exhaled, shaking his head. I couldn't. It didn't sit right with me. Myra's lips trembled. So what? You feel guilty now? Is that why you called me here? Damien nodded. Yes. She let out a dry, humorless chuckle. Wow, how noble of you. He took a step closer, but she held up her hand. Don't, she warned. Damien hesitated. I know an apology won't fix this, but I need you to know, I didn't do this to hurt you. At first, yes, it was a bet. But that night, when I was with you, something changed. I wasn't just with a woman who wanted my money. You were different, Mira." She clenched her fists. "Different," she repeated, voice shaking. "You don't get to say that. You don't get to pretend this was something it wasn't. You paid me like I was nothing, Damien. And I took it, because I was desperate. But I never thought I was being played. I never thought of you as nothing." His voice was almost gentle now, but Mira refused to let it sway her. She took a shaky breath, blinking back the tears that threatened to fall. "I needed that money, Damien. I sold my dignity for it. And you," her voice cracked, "you made me believe it was my choice. But I was just entertainment to you." Silence stretched between them. Then she whispered, "I hate you." Damien didn't flinch. He just stared at her, his eyes unreadable. She turned and walked away. And this time, he didn't stop her. Mira barely remembered how she got home. The moment she stepped inside her small apartment, she locked the door and slid to the floor, burying her face in her hands. The anger, the humiliation, the betrayal, it all came crashing down at once. She had thought she was making a sacrifice for her family. That one night of shame was worth it if it meant saving her mother and keeping Emeka in school. But now, knowing she had been nothing more than a wager between rich men, she felt sick. 4 days, she refused to leave the house. She turned off her phone, ignored Tasha's calls, and avoided Emeka's questions about why she suddenly looked so sad. She couldn't even look at herself in the mirror without feeling disgusted. The money was still there, untouched. Even though she had already spent part of it on hospital bills, the rest sat in an envelope on her table like a haunting reminder of what she had done. It didn't feel like a blessing anymore. It felt like blood money. One evening, a soft knock on the door startled her. She hesitated before opening it, half expecting Tasha. But it wasn't her. It was Damien. Mira's breath hitched, her fingers tightening on the doorknob. "What are you doing here?" she asked coldly. He looked different, not as confident, not as untouchable. For the first time, he actually looked human. "I needed to see you," he said. Mira scoffed. "Haven't you done enough?" Damien sighed. "I don't expect forgiveness, Mira. I need you to know that I regret it." She laughed bitterly. "Regret? Damien, I have to live with this for the rest of my life. I have to wake up every day knowing that I was a bet, a joke to you and your rich friends. And now you come here to tell me you regret it. What do you want me to do with that? I don't want anything from you." His voice was softer now. "I just wanted you to know that you weren't just a game to me. Not anymore." Mira clenched her jaw, fighting back tears. "That doesn't change anything." "I know," Damien admitted. "But I wanted to say it anyway." Silence filled the air between them. For a moment, Mira almost believed him. But belief wouldn't erase the damage he had done. Without another word, she shut the door in his face. She stood there for a long time, her chest rising and falling with heavy breaths. And as Damien's footsteps faded away, so did the last trace of whatever foolish hope she once had. She had made a choice. She had paid the price. Now, all she could do was move on. Mira sat by the window, staring out at the bustling Lagos streets. Life outside continued as if nothing had happened, but inside, she felt like a different person. Someone who had been stripped of her innocence, her pride, and the last shred of dignity she once held. She thought back to the girl she used to be, the hopeful, ambitious dreamer who believed that hard work would eventually pay off. That girl was gone now, replaced by someone who had learned the harshest lesson of all. Nothing in this world comes without a price. Her mother was getting better, Emeka was in school, and the bills were paid. That should have been enough. That should have been her victory. But was it really? Every time she closed her eyes, she could still hear Damien's voice, his confession echoing in her mind. "You were a bet, Mira." She had spent years avoiding the stereotype, the idea that every struggling girl had a price. She had fought so hard to be different. And yet, with one desperate decision, she had fallen into the very trap she swore she never would. The worst part wasn't even the betrayal. It was the realization that she had done this to herself. The money was still on the table, untouched since the day she confronted Damien. She had thought about returning it, throwing it away, even burning it. But what difference would it make? Would it undo the past? No. Instead, it would leave her with nothing. She hated that she still needed it. A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. She hesitated before answering, half expecting Damien again. But this time, it was Tasha. "Girl, where have you been? I've been calling you non-stop," Tasha exclaimed, stepping inside. Mira folded her arms. "I needed time." Tasha gave her a long look before sighing. "I heard what happened." Myra's chest tightened. "Who told you?" "People talk," Tasha said, sitting on the couch. "Damien's friends, they joke about it. About how the rich always win." Myra's stomach twisted. "Of course they do." Tasha leaned forward. "Mira, listen. I know this hurts, but you have to move on. What happened doesn't define you." Mira let out a hollow laugh. "Doesn't it? Because I feel like it does." Tasha reached for her hand. "Then don't let it. You're better than this. You made a mistake, but that doesn't mean your life is over." Mira swallowed hard. Maybe Tasha was right. Maybe she could rebuild, find a way to be herself again. But she knew one thing for sure, she would never be the same. She had slept with a billionaire for money. And the price she paid. Her soul, her peace, and a version of herself she could never get back.